Boldwood presents Murder at the Wedding, written by Anita Davison and read by Una Beeson. Hector and Madeline Merrill request the pleasure of your company at the wedding of their daughter, Hannah Mary Cordelia, to Mr. Darius Alexander Bartholomew Clifford, at St. Nicholas Church, Chiswick, on Saturday, May the 4th, 1918, at 2 p.m. Chapter 1. Although jittery with nerves, Hannah attempted to remain perfectly still while her sister Iris secured her headdress with several dangerous-looking pins. Her sister turned away briefly and, taking advantage of her distraction, Hannah tweaked a thorn that scratched her temple. "Don't touch!" Iris slapped her hand away. "You'll ruin it." "Sorry." Hannah grimaced and dropped her hand into her lap, gripping it tightly in the other. "These pale pink rosebuds complement your dark hair beautifully," Iris said, evidently delighted with her handiwork. From the corner of her eye, Hannah spotted her mother approach, holding a length of Honiton lace. "Mamma, we talked about this," she said through gritted teeth. "I'm not wearing Grandmamma's veil." She pulled back her chin as a distinctive smell of mothballs reached her. "Don't look so disapproving, darling," Madeline said dismissively. "You'll change your mind when you see what it looks like on." Iris suppressed a cough, covering her nose with one hand, the other still clamped on the headdress to keep it in place. "It is rather yellow." Nora Atherton, Iris's sister-in-law, wrinkled her nose and fingered the lace with mild disgust. "It won't go with the gown at all." Hannah had included Nora in the wedding party as a courtesy, a decision she now regretted. "It's a family heirloom." Madeline's upper lip curled as she snatched the veil from Nora's hand. "And it must be over 50 years old." "It certainly looks it," Aunt Violet muttered from a chair in the corner. "Not today," Hannah said in an undertone, summoning patience. "Mamma, I'm sure you and Grandmamma both looked wonderful in it when you got married, but it's not what I want for my special day." "I've waited so long for this day," Madeline whined, the veil hanging limp between her hands like a dejected ghost. "I want it to be special." "It will be special, to Darius and me." Hannah removed the hand mirror from her lap and dropped it onto the dressing table hard enough to break, but it stayed intact. "And I'm 25, hardly a spinster of the parish." Madeline continued to stoutly resist Hannah's desire for a small, intimate wedding, on the basis an extravagant display was inappropriate for wartime, with more than one argument on the subject conducted publicly in a department store. For years, Hannah was constantly reminded that Iris had fulfilled their mother's ambition by marrying the son of a wealthy landowner at 18, with a wedding that would have made Gloria Vanderbilt's mother proud. To make matters worse, Iris was now the mother of 4 beautiful, healthy children. "I hope that spinster remark wasn't aimed at me." Aunt Violet lounged in a slipper chair in the corner, her stockinged feet crossed over a footstool, and her luxurious chocolate-coloured hair wound into curling rags. "I'm sorry, Aunt Violet. I didn't mean to imply anything." Hannah groaned inwardly, aware her nerves had made her voice sharp. "I was only joking." Her aunt laughingly waved her off. It's not as if I haven't chosen not to marry. Although my 40s sneaked up on me rather sooner than I imagined. Anyway, weren't veils devices to prevent the groom balking at first sight of his bride at the altar? Mr. Clifford won't change his mind, surely. Penny Wells, Hannah's 16-year-old bookshop assistant, said from where she was folding Hannah's trousseau into neat piles on a chest of drawers. I know it's been a long engagement, but as my father always says, when one overthinks a decision, doubts can creep in. Penny wore a pale blue frothy dress and matching hat, her toffee brown curls bouncing on her shoulders. Vanity had made her leave her spectacles at home for the occasion. And with her expressive brown eyes and dimpled cheeks, she resembled a figure from Kingsley's Water Babies. After months of silent devotion to Archie, their bookshop manager, they were now officially walking out. Penny! Iris snapped, her vivid blue eyes wide in horror. Don't even suggest such a thing. She's right, though, Hannah sighed, accustomed to the girl's habit of saying exactly what was on her mind without thinking. At her age, she probably did the same herself. I've often wondered if this day would come. And don't worry, Penny, I'm not offended. Although she was. A little. Her fiancé's work at the War Office meant Darius was frequently called away at short notice, which had disrupted their wedding preparations 3 times thus far. There, it's finished. Iris inserted the last pin and stepped back to admire her work. What do you think? Hannah swung her head from side to side, examining the result in her dressing table mirror. Iris, it's perfect. Exactly what I wanted. A wide satin band encircled her forehead, dipping slightly towards the back of her head, and the right side was adorned with a swathe of tightly furled white, pink, and yellow roses. Don't you think so, Mamma? She asked, shooting her mother a look that dared her to find fault. It's pretty enough, I suppose, Madeline replied grudgingly. I still think rosebuds are a strange choice. Wedding roses should be gloriously full-blown and of the deepest scarlet. You don't even have any bridesmaids. Mads, do stop complaining. Aunt Violet made a face at her sister. It's far too late to change things, and should anyone want my opinion, I think she looks lovely. Hannah threw her a grateful smile, and Madeline retreated to the far side of the room, tutting to herself. Oh, Iris, Hannah whispered low enough so her mother would not hear. Why does Mamma make everything so stressful? She raised her hand to eye level. Look, I'm shaking. She was the same on my wedding day. Iris stroked the round bulge beneath her dress with one hand, her resigned gaze going to Madeline. And when this little one makes an appearance, no doubt she'll be offering endless unwanted advice, despite it being my 5th. Iris unhooked a gown wrapped in a muslin sheath from the front of the wardrobe and carried it back to Hannah's chair. Now, let's get you into this dress. I know it's early, but then we'll have time for any last-minute alterations. You're a darling for keeping me grounded, Hannah whispered, stepping gingerly into the gown that Iris held open at her feet. I'm so glad you're here. That's what older sisters are for. Iris deftly fastened the row of fabric-covered buttons that ran from the neckline to waist, then swung the cheval mirror closer so Hannah could view the full ensemble. Oh! Hannah gasped, hardly recognising herself in the glass. "It's nicer than I could ever have imagined." Fashioned in ivory satin, with a scooped neckline and full skirt that skimmed her slender figure, the gown was lightly cinched at the waist. A floral organza lace overlay, embroidered with forget-me-nots and leaves, flowed in gentle folds to the floor. Elbow-length bell sleeves in the same organza completed the look. "It's exquisite," Nora sighed. "You look quite lovely, almost ethereal." "You'll do very nicely," Aunt Violet nodded sagely, the equivalent of a compliment from her. "You don't think it's too simple without a train, do you?" Hannah pirouetted in front of the cheval mirror. Madeline choked on a sob. "You're beautiful." She clasped her hands beneath her chin, her eyes suspiciously wet. "And I was mistaken about the veil. The gown looks much better without it." "You'll float down that aisle like a duchess." Iris bent to tweak the skirt into place, then winced, a hand below her bump. Hannah's eyes widened. "Are you all right? Is it the baby?" Iris straightened and shook her head, though her smile was strained. "A brief pang, that's all. I get them every time I'm expecting, so nothing to worry about." Her gaze went to their mother in a "don't mention it" look, but Madeline was busy correcting Penny's packing technique. Hannah chewed her bottom lip gently, uncertain whether to pursue it, but Iris seemed to recover quickly, and she had been pregnant 4 times before. "I will be all right, won't I?" Hannah asked, her heart thrumming faster in her chest. "I keep dreaming that I'll trip and fall flat on my face in the middle of the aisle with everyone watching and—" She broke off as a clatter of gravel at the window sent her jumping back in alarm. Tutting in annoyance, Madeline strode to the window and pulled up the sash as far as it would go and leaned out. "Whatever do you think you're doing, young man? My goodness! Darius! Is that you?" Aunt Violet left her chair and joined her, followed by Iris and then Nora and Penny, their combined feminine rears crowding the opening as they stared down into the front garden below. "What's he doing here?" Hannah rose and skirted the dressing table, mindful of her skirt snagging on the furniture. "He's supposed to be getting ready at Cavern's house." Hannah had retained her friendship with Dr. Cavan Soames in the 2 years since the murder of his wife. Lily Ann Soames had been Hannah's best friend, and her loss still hit Hannah hard at unguarded moments. Cavan had kindly offered his impressive house opposite the church for the reception, Hannah's charming home by the river being unsuitable for a large gathering. "He mustn't see you," Madeline intercepted her, arms spread wide to block her view of the window. "It's extremely bad luck." "When did I ever believe in luck, Mamma, good or bad?" Hannah attempted to ease past her without success. "Let me pass. Something must have happened." "You stay right there. We'll handle whatever it is." Madeline held up a finger in warning before adding her rounded backside to those lined up at the window. "Why didn't you knock?" Aunt Violet demanded, her upper body so far out of the window she was in danger of toppling onto the lawn below. "I did," Darius's deep, disembodied voice replied. "No one answered the front door." "This is most irregular, Darius dear," Madeline said haughtily. "We're trying to get ready and there's still a lot to do." "My apologies, future mother-in-law." Darius's melodious voice created a flutter in Hannah's lower belly. Did a last-minute summons from the Admiralty bring him, or was he having second thoughts, as Penny had suggested? If so, she couldn't blame him. Hannah had experienced moments of doubt herself, accompanied by sheer panic as the day grew closer. I see he omitted to add a visit to a barber in his preparations, Aunt Violet muttered, a smile in her voice. Impatience spiked Hannah's already tight nerves, and she pushed between them and leaned over the sill, her gaze finding Darius on the path below. All 6'3" of him in an old jacket and collarless shirt, his longer-than-fashionable hair uncombed. Catching sight of her, he grinned, creating more butterflies in Hannah's stomach. Well, don't you look splendid with those flowers in your hair? Thank you, darling. But why are you here? Her voice rose in panic. Please don't say you've been called back to the Admiralty. Thankfully, no. Darius rubbed the back of his neck with one hand. However, there might be a slight hiccup regarding the ceremony. It's not Xander, is it? Iris clutched her neckline, her motherly instincts rising. She had left her husband, Mycroft, at the Coach and Horses in Kew with their eldest son, Alexander, who was normally the least likely of her offspring to cause havoc. Unless the boy is swinging on a rope from the altar cross, Iris, what possible trouble could a 9-year-old cause? Madeline said, with ill-concealed scorn. Xander's perfectly fine, Iris, as far as I know, Darius replied. But, he scanned the road both ways before continuing. There's a slight problem with Reverend Aldrich. How slight? Hannah conjured an image of the handsome young vicar, who, despite being new to the parish, fitted in well with the community. Where is he? That's just it. We don't know. Darius flung both hands in the air in resignation. No one has seen him since 10 this morning. I don't suppose anyone here has seen him? Maybe he had an early morning assignation, Aunt Violet suggested. A man that handsome, and on the right side of 30, is bound to set a few hearts fluttering among the congregation. Violet, have some respect, Madeline snapped, aghast. He's a man of the cloth. But still a man, isn't he? Aunt Violet lifted both shoulders in an exasperated shrug. I wish it were so easily explained. Darius bit back a laugh. He certainly isn't here, Madeline said, shoving Hannah to one side. Well, don't just stand there, Darius. Find him. He cannot have gone far. He's not a stray dog, Mamma, Hannah muttered irritably. Then louder, perhaps he was called away to an emergency? I agree. That's possible. And you're right. Darius shoved a hand into his hair, distracted. He probably ran out of communion wine or something equally trivial. I expect he's already back at the vicarage. He scuffed the toe of his shoe against the dirt path. Apologies all. I'm probably panicking over nothing. He turned to walk away, thought better of it, and returned to the gate. By the way, I meant it, Hannah. I've never seen you look so beautiful. I appreciate that, Darius, even though only half of me is visible from down there. Hannah relaxed, strangely emotional and suddenly shy. Perhaps they should have gone to Caxton Hall to do the deed, with Aunt Violet and her partner Aidan, otherwise known as Detective Chief Inspector Farrell, as witnesses after all. an option that had been seriously discussed at one point.
"Now, go away. We'll see you in the church later,"
Madeline called, then slammed the window down with a bang, narrowly missing Hannah's fingers.
"That will cause a right hoo-ha at the church if the vicar is missing."
Penny slumped onto the chair Hannah had just vacated and poked her fingers into a powder puff on the dresser.
"That's enough, Penny."
Aunt Violet glared at her, but undeterred, Penny merely shrugged.
"Not missing."
Hannah's voice shook slightly. "I prefer to think of it as a temporary delay." She paced the floor while picking at a hangnail.
"I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation,"
she added with more confidence than she felt.
"Reverend Aldrich will turn up at the last moment, and all this drama will have been for nothing." "Then where is he?"
Madeline snapped.
"I asked after him earlier when I went to check the flower arrangements. He wasn't there."
Hannah mentally altered the word check to supervise, and suspected the vicar had made himself scarce when he saw her coming.
"There's still plenty of time."
Madeline guided Hannah back to the dressing table, dislodging Iris without ceremony and giving Penny a hard look.
"Sit down and finish your toilette, darling. Everything will be fine, I'm sure."
"What if they don't find him?" Hannah's scalp itched, but she resisted the urge to scratch her head for fear of ruining her sister's careful work.
"The ceremony will have to be postponed. Again." "Can't the church warden step in and officiate?"
Iris suggested.
"Don't be silly, dear," Madeline tutted. "It has to be an ordained priest, not a lay person."
"It would be a shame to waste all that food everyone collected for the party." Aunt Violet sounded mildly put out. Not that she had been responsible for preparing any of it.
"I could always call my papa,"
Penny said into the brief but tense silence that followed.
"That's most kind of you, dear."
Madeline's patronising laugh made Hannah flinch.
"But unless he's an ordained Anglican priest, I doubt he'll be of any use whatsoever."
"Well, actually, he is." Penny eased backwards onto the bed, her hands braced on either side of her knees, her feet several inches off the floor and her legs swinging like a schoolgirl.
"St. Hilda's is in the same parish, and Papa stepped in for the previous minister before. Would you like me to call him?"
"Oh, Penny, would you?" Hannah pressed her crossed hands to her throat. "I hope we won't need him, but having him on hand would be comforting."
"Excellent."
Penny launched herself onto the floor, landing with a surprisingly solid thump for someone of her size.
"I won't be long."
She turned back at the door.
"At least, I hope not. Only sometimes he forgets we have a telephone at all and asks what that strange noise is."
She hunched her shoulders before disappearing around the door jamb, her rapid footsteps retreating down the stairs. I had completely forgotten her father was a clergyman. Hannah twisted in her chair to face Madeline. "And I hope you're ashamed of yourself, Mamma. You were rather condescending to Penny just now."
"Oh, pish! How was I to know?"
Madeline slumped back against the buttoned upholstery of her armchair.
"Is it too early for a sherry?"
"I sincerely hope not." Aunt Violet held up a half-filled glass. "This is my second. Although, to be fair, it's not sherry. It's gin." Chapter 2. "Are you certain your father said he could get here on time, Penny?" Hannah's hands inside her gloves felt clammy as she gripped her bouquet and prepared for the short walk from the lich gate to the church door.
"I'm sure he will, Miss Merrill,"
Penny insisted. But there was trepidation in her voice,
Even wearing his cassock, he can work up a fair lick on his bicycle.
I hope so. Hannah toyed with the image of a middle-aged man in a long gown pedalling like fury, but with her nauseous stomach, she could not conjure a smile. The small entourage exited the house, her mother in a pale lilac suit, with a gigantic hat that bounced as she walked. Aunt Violet followed in a subtle sage-green tunic dress, a new fashion that had yet to take hold but guaranteed to draw both admiring and outraged looks, since she had dispensed with a corset. Madeline tutted disapprovingly.
Violet, you cannot leave the house half-dressed.
Tunic dresses are all the rage now, Nora interjected. Corsets are going out of fashion.
It's not as if she needs one anyway,
Iris added to the anti-Madeline brigade.
She's so tall and shapely. I'm quite envious, especially when I look so matronly.
She looked down at the bump beneath her dress. I think you look lovely, all of you. Hannah turned at the front gate and surveyed the outfits, each one in a different pastel shade, which reflected those of Hannah's bouquet.
Here he is.
Madeline breathed a sigh of relief as a sleek, forest-green Daimler stopped beside them. A wide white ribbon ran from the roof to the end of the bonnet, where it tied into an enormous bow. Through the window she spotted her father, Hector, in full top hat and tails on the back seat.
Mamma, was this your idea?
Hannah gasped.
I don't need to be driven. The church is barely a 5-minute walk away. As soon as I get in, I'll have to get out again.
Of course you do, her mother said, sounding suitably outraged. You cannot possibly walk to your own wedding. At least that's something we can agree on, Aunt Violet muttered, looking up from where she was attaching her corsage to her dress.
I've instructed the driver to make a slow tour of the area to settle your nerves and give us all time to get there before you. By then, Penny's father should have arrived.
Madeline fussily tweaked the folds of Hannah's skirt. I'm hoping we wouldn't need him. Hannah tugged the fabric out of her mother's fingers and climbed in beside her father. Although I assume that means there's still no sign of Reverend Aldrich? She addressed the question to her small entourage, but it was her father who answered. I'm afraid not, darling. Hector shook his head and slid further along the leather seat, giving her space to spread her skirt to avoid creases. But don't you worry, everything will be fine. He clasped her free hand and squeezed, not letting go until the vehicle pulled up on the road outside the church. The Daimler rolled to a halt beside the lich gate, and Aidan, otherwise known as Detective Chief Inspector Farrell, wearing full mourning garb, leapt forward and flung open the door. No need to panic, Hannah. Reverend Wells arrived a few minutes ago. He's happily ensconced in the chancel, ordering choir boys about. So, we're all set. That's a relief. Hannah exhaled a calming breath, finally able to summon a smile. You've been wonderful, and I know it's been a fraught morning for everyone, but no time, Hannah, I better get back. Aidan saluted her smartly. Having the best man pelting through the church has already unnerved the guests. I'll see you inside. Before she could utter another word, he was halfway back down the path. A group of locals had gathered on the road, and a wave of sighs and a few gasps erupted as she alighted from the motor car and walked up the path on her father's arm, pausing inside the porch, which smelled of dust and the scent of roses. Well, this is it, my darling. Hector whispered as the opening chords of the bridal march drifted along the aisle. You know it's not too late to— Papa, as if I would. And anyway, Mother would kill me. And me for letting you. He leant closer, his soft moustache tickling her cheek. And if I don't get the chance to tell you later, you are the most beautiful bride I have seen in my entire life. That's very sweet, Papa. But I'm quite certain you said the same to Iris when you escorted her down the aisle. Ah, I don't recall. He feigned a frown. And why would I, when you have always been my favourite? His eyes, like her own, sparkled, and her throat closed with emotion. Suddenly, unable to speak, she gripped his arm tighter. Forcing her feet to obey, she walked slowly towards the altar, where Darius waited, with an amiable-looking man, shorter than both Aidan and Darius by several inches, his round face beaming a smile of welcome, whose vestments swamped his compact frame. Darius's gaze remained fixed on her throughout the seemingly endless walk across the tiled floor towards him, his expression a mixture of pride and admiration that made her heartbeat quicken. Reverend Wells conducted the ceremony with a large dose of humour and a penchant for inappropriate side comments, which created bubbles of laughter among the guests that made everyone relax. The ceremony passed in a blur, while Hannah's focus stayed solely on Darius's face. His low, melodious voice soothed her as he spoke his vows, her hand in his. The small congregation behind her faded away, and she became conscious of only the subtle perfume of the arches of blue, yellow, and pink flowers that must have decimated every florist in Surrey, combined with the musty smell of old stone and dust, as spring sunlight slanted through long, stained-glass windows, creating jewel-coloured patterns on the stone tiles. After Hannah and Darius were declared husband and wife, Reverend Wells embraced his adopted role with enthusiasm and corralled the guests into the porch to pose for photographs, giving orders like a ringmaster. The process ended with a collective sigh of relief, and the photographer rapidly repacked his equipment, while muttering about another event he was due at. The guests drifted onto the path and over towards the lich gate, where they congregated in small groups to chatter, which prompted Reverend Wells to call them all back again with a frantic waving of arms. The wedding breakfast will commence in a while, but would everyone remain here while the bride and groom adjourn to the south side of the churchyard for a private moment? Accompanied by smothered laughter, smirks, and some raised eyebrows, Darius took Hannah's hand and drew her back into the church, along the aisle and into the vestry. They took the side door into the churchyard, to where the Benthel mausoleum occupied a small clearing with no nearby graves, the area surrounded by thick hedges, where the nostalgic smell of newly cut grass permeated the air. A slab of polished Portland stone that reached Hannah's chin bore a pensive angel reclined on the top, her gaze fixed on the far distance, set within wrought iron railings. A gate at one end led down 3 steps to a thick wooden door with brass studs. You don't think this is macabre, do you? Hannah tightened her grip on Darius's hand as they approached the tomb. Lily-Anne would have loved being here today, and I wanted to remember her in some way. Not at all. As I said when you first mentioned it, it's a beautiful tribute to her. I'm mildly annoyed at Reverend Aldrich for letting us down so badly. Hannah fingered the satin ribbon that held her bouquet together. If he didn't want to officiate, he had only to inform us. Perhaps he had an emergency and had to leave. We'll probably find a note under a pew later, apologising.
Then he should have delegated the task to another minister.
Hannah realised she was being uncharitable and softened her tone. Although, actually, Reverend Wells was a perfect substitute. It was so nice of him to step in. It was. But all I really care about is that after all the false starts, delays, not to mention the murders, we're finally married.
You always were a sentimental old thing deep down.
Hannah slid her hand into his and drew him closer to the railed enclosure of the tomb where her best friend lay.
I'll always remember you, Lily-Anne.
Hannah blinked away welling tears as she stooped and placed her bouquet of pink and yellow rosebuds, forget-me-nots and dianthus at the base of the gate.
I cannot believe it's over 2 years since she
died. The words, "was murdered," stuck in her throat. I still expect her to walk up my garden path in one of her frilly white dresses, floppy hat, and one of those ridiculous parasols she loved. Her flamboyance added to her charm, Darius said with a smile in his voice. But Lily-Anne wouldn't want you to be upset. Not today. He ran a finger down her cheek, then leaned down to brush her lips. A soft, gentle touch which lingered for a few seconds, then became more urgent as the moment stretched, until at last she pulled back, her cheeks hot. "We'd better get back," she said, slightly breathless. "Our guests are waiting." "I suppose we should. My father brought a fine blended malt whisky from his cellar, and I've spotted several of the men eyeing it." Hannah cast a final look back at the tomb as she stepped onto the path and halted. "Darius, wait. The door to the tomb is open." "I doubt it." He shrugged lightly. "It's set several feet down, so it's probably just a shadow you can see." He reached to grasp her hand again, but she pulled it away. "No, I'm sure it's open." Hannah returned to the surrounding railings and pushed the gate with her hand. It creaked open a few inches. "This gate is always locked." "Maintenance, perhaps?" Darius offered, though it was half-hearted. "Come on, we have a reception to attend. Cavern's staff has been working all morning, setting out a spread."
"There's no reason for the tomb to be open."
Hannah shifted her vantage point so she could see inside.
"They locked it after Lily-Anne's interment, and it hasn't been open since."
At the bottom of the steps lay the distinctive outline of a sole of a shoe. A man's shoe. Her stomach knotted.
"There's someone down there, and he's not moving."
Darius was halfway to the vestry door, but her tone halted him. Turning, he returned to her side. "Are you sure?" He peered over her shoulder. "You're right. He's lying on the floor, and by the look of it, he's wearing a cassock."
"Could it be Reverend Aldrich?"
Hannah gasped, instantly regretting her earlier comment. "I don't know. Let me take a proper look." She started to follow, but he held up a hand. "No, you stay here. I'll go." He swung the gate inwards and descended the steps. Hannah halted and chewed her bottom lip, hoping she was mistaken, but knew she was not. Darius returned almost instantly, his expression grim. "It is him. And he's dead. I'd better fetch Aidan." Hannah's knees gave way, and she lowered herself onto the top step leading into the vestry. A gentle wind rustled the hedges and the tops of the trees beyond, and a flap of wings and a distant bird's song contrived to make it a perfect spring day, apart from the dead body inside the tomb. Conscious she was being unreasonable, even callous, her mind raged. It's not fair. It's our wedding day. Hannah had no real sense of how much time passed before Aidan appeared at the vestry door, followed by Darius, Aunt Violet, and Cavan, all with concerned, puzzled faces. A commotion erupted behind them as some of the guests tried to follow, while Reverend Wells flapped his arms like an agitated penguin in an attempt to hold them back. "Ladies and gentlemen," Darius raised both arms and took charge, "would everyone adjourn to Dr. Cavan Soames's house across the road while we await the police?" "What's happened?" Madeline demanded, as she pushed through the small crowd. But Darius merely smiled enigmatically and ushered her through the side gate. Aidan aimed a curt but understanding nod at Hannah as he strode past her and descended the steps into the mausoleum. Cavan looked about to follow, but hesitated, laying a comforting hand on Hannah's shoulder. "Do you feel faint? Can I get you anything?" "I'm shaken, but otherwise fine." Hannah smiled weakly up at him. "I only saw his feet before Darius insisted I should come away." "Is it true?" Aunt Violet reached her and looked from Hannah to Cavan and back again. "Reverend Aldrich is dead?" "I'm afraid so," Hannah replied, just as Aidan reappeared climbing the steps more slowly than he had descended them. "How did it happen?" Aunt Violet asked. "Did he fall?" "At first glance it appears so, but we cannot be certain." Aidan's gaze slid over Hannah and settled on Cavan. "Dr. Soames, could I ask you to confirm the death? And might I use your telephone to inform the police?" "Oh, of course. It's on the wall, outside my study." He remained where he was, frozen for long seconds. Then he swallowed, adjusted his tie and took a deep breath before taking Darius's place at the entrance to the tomb. Hannah climbed to her feet and smoothed down her skirt with hands that shook, while focusing on Cavan's rigid back. Would he seek out his wife's coffin, where it had lain on a stone shelf between those of her deceased relatives for the last 2 years? Or would he consciously avoid it to focus on the dead man on the ground? Then another thought intruded. Why had Reverend Aldrich entered the tomb at all? "Come with me, Hannah." Aunt Violet wrapped a firm arm around Hannah's shoulders and forced her upright. "Let's leave the authorities to do their worst." The mausoleum receded behind them, and they had reached the door to Cavan's house on the corner, before Hannah said, "Did you say worst?" "I did," Aunt Violet said, lowering her voice. "The police will need to question everyone, and I suspect things are about to get awkward. Since there's nothing you can do here, we might as well get ourselves a drink." "That's the best suggestion I've heard all morning," a commanding female voice said from behind them. Hannah turned to see Cavan's sister dressed in a flowing pale green silk dress decorated with red roses, her flaming red hair topped with a scarlet felt hat, set at an angle towards her left eye, making a vivid splash of colour among the dark suits and pastel dresses around her. "Eliza, how lovely you were able to come." Hannah pressed her hands warmly. "I'm only sorry things aren't turning out quite as anyone expected." Of a similar age to Hannah, Eliza had run away from home a decade earlier to become an actress and had since worked in several West End theatres, making a name for herself. "It's not your fault, sweetheart. And a tragedy aside, this is all quite the drama, isn't it? I'll certainly dine out on this one for a while. And Hannah, dear, you look exquisite. Doesn't she, Vi?" "She does indeed." Aunt Violet slipped one arm through Hannah's and linked the other through Eliza's. "Now, let's go and get some of that champagne I've been eyeing since I arrived." Chapter 3. Following an unusually dry April, the early May weather had stayed miraculously warm, and the 20 or so wedding guests fitted neatly into Cavern's drawing room that opened into a double-height conservatory. 2 sets of French doors opened into the garden with a central water fountain. A canvas canopy had been set up, beneath which were several chairs, sofas, and a low table for guests to sit outside. Cavern's impressive dining table had been co-opted to accommodate the wedding breakfast, laden with more food than Hannah had seen in a year. A whole salmon dressed with transparent slices of cucumber took pride of place on one side of the table, with a whole cooked ham on the other. In between were arranged platters of sandwiches, pork and veal and ham pies, both savoury and sweet pastries, trifles, fruit tarts, fairy cakes, and a 3-tiered iced wedding cake adorned with sugar novelties and flowers, all spread in a fabulous display. "Everyone is talking about the minister," Madeline said, waylaying Hannah inside the drawing-room door. "I thought he was simply missing." "Not anymore, Mads. It turns out he was here all the time, just not alive." Aunt Violet kept her voice low while nodding and smiling at the arriving guests. Hannah hardly needs reminding. She's the one who should be upset. It's her wedding day.
"Violet, I know perfectly well what day it is,"
her mother retorted, a sisterly argument clearly brewing. "Mamma, please don't be difficult, and I'm fine, really." Hannah pressed her aunt's arm in reassurance. "I've seen bodies before." Though her sympathy for the vicar was diluted by disappointment that her long-awaited wedding had included another death. If it was an accident, that's something we can be grateful for. "Something tells me it wasn't," Aunt Violet murmured, earning a puzzled smile from Hannah, who would have liked to pursue this idea, but her mother's eager expression showed she was waiting for a reaction to all her efforts. "This is wonderful, Mamma, but there's far too much for just us." Hannah summoned an appreciative smile, but her aunt's comment repeated in her head. "Where did it all come from?" "Don't ask," her father whispered in her ear. "Suffice it to say, we'll all be on porridge and pea soup for the next month."
"Don't exaggerate, Hector,"
Madeline snapped, then lowered her voice.
"Mycroft and Iris supplied most of the fresh meat from his estate. As for the rest, I admit we decimated everyone's ration books, not to mention Cavern's larder."
"Well, I'm thrilled, and Darius will appreciate all your efforts, I'm sure." Hannah scanned the room, but her new husband was nowhere to be seen.
"Well, this is a turn-up, I must say."
Darius's father elbowed his way into the group.
"Hannah, my dear, allow me to offer my congratulations and welcome to the family."
His eyes, like Darius's, apart from the fine lines at the edges, sparkled. "Thank you, and I appreciate you making the journey. What should I call you now? Father-in-law sounds too formal when I've known you most of my life.
Joshua will suit quite well, my dear. I'm not old yet, he said with a slow wink. Ah, what's this about the vicar falling down the steps of the Bentham family tomb? Bit clumsy of him, what?
Hannah decided this was not the time to enlighten him. Will you be staying a while, Mr. Joshua? If so, there is always room for you at Ilchester Place.
I appreciate your kindness, my dear, but after so many years in the country, London feels foreign to me these days.
He pushed a hank of salt and pepper hair that had slipped onto his low forehead, a gesture Nora's husband, Selwyn, bald since his 30s, eyed enviously.
I went to Green Park yesterday to look for crocuses, but the flower beds were all dug up for vegetables,
Joshua said, his irritation evident.
Couldn't take a stroll on the grass either. What with all those jack-booted soldiers doing drills?
I agree. Madeline paused to take a sip from her glass. The parks have been ruined with those tents all over the place. I'm told the lake in St. James's Park has been drained to make way for some ministry or other. It's all very necessary, Mamma. Hannah aimed for a mixture of exasperation at her parent and sympathy for Joshua. We need food badly, and the army needs somewhere to train until this dreadful war is over. And when will that be exactly? Madeline sniffed. This war has gone on far too long. Before Hannah could contrive an answer, her nephew shouldered his way into the group, a fairy cake in his hand.
Xander!
Iris appeared suddenly and snatched it away. Cakes are for after. How many times must I say it? Did Uncle Darius really find a body in the mausoleum? He asked, with all the candour of a 9-year-old. I thought that's where they're kept. Well, yes, Iris replied uneasily. No one expected this particular one to be there. Can I see it? I want to tell the boys at school. When I told them I was going to a wedding, they said it would be boring. You're not going to see it. A look of panic crossed Iris's face. Nanny, would you take Xander upstairs? I don't think he should be here at a time like this. Who are you talking to, Iris? Madeline stared at her. You left your nanny in Surrey in charge of the rest of your brood, remember? Goodness, I completely forgot. Iris looked nonplussed before she aimed a pleading look at her mother. Mamma, would you be a dear and take him? Why don't you do it? I gave up child-minding years ago, her mother snapped. Besides, I want to hear what the police think happened to Reverend Aldrich. If Grandma is staying, then so am I. Xander planted his feet apart, arms crossed, and glared at them. I want to know how the body got there. So do we all, son, Mycroft muttered from Madeline's other side as he joined them. But perhaps your mother is right. This isn't the place for... But he spoke to thin air, as Xander was fast disappearing through the open French doors into the garden. Oh, good grief, I'd better go after him, Mycroft said grudgingly. He'll be through the back gate and out the church before we know it. The resigned look on her brother-in-law's face told Hannah it had not been his idea to leave the nanny at home. It's unfortunate, but at least they didn't find the body until after the ceremony, Madeline said. Mother! Iris snapped. Of
all the inappropriate things you've said today, that is the worst. The man was already dead, darling, so what difference would it have made to him?
Madeline shrugged, unapologetic. It's still been a lovely wedding, despite the upset, Aunt Violet said, possibly to divert the hard look Iris directed at her mother. I doubt anyone will want to make any speeches, though.
Darius will see that as a bonus. Joshua snorted a laugh. My son never took to public speaking. Made a pig's ear of the debating club at school.
Hannah kept her gaze fixed on the hall door, awaiting Darius's arrival. But he did not appear.
Let's hope the police don't keep us too long, or you won't be able to leave for your honeymoon.
Selwyn swiped a vol au vent from the tray of a passing maid, earning himself a hard nudge in the ribs from his wife. We've shelved that idea for the time being, Selwyn. Hannah tried not to let her disappointment show. We cannot leave London in case Darius is called into the War Office. However, he's promised me a trip to Paris when the war is over.
I hear Paris has fared no better than London with all the bombings.
Mycroft rejoined the conversation, minus Xander. Hannah wondered how long it would take him or Iris to notice. If the French still have control by then, Aunt Violet murmured darkly. The Germans shelled the Tuileries Gardens. Such wanton vandalism.
Why, all sad faces.
Eliza nudged her way into their close huddle.
Hannah, darling,
you're not allowed to be so glum at your own wedding. Grabbing Archie's arm as he and Penny passed, she dragged him to a halt.
Now, Archie, is it? Didn't I hear you say you